Morning. It's Friday. Is anyone else wearing their Blue Sea Peter shirt? I I wore it because I didn't want to get dressed up. Sounds so silly. Have I really been dressed up for any of these? I don't know. Anyway, we are talking about humans today. We are reading lesson 4, and we're going to be talking about we humans impact ecosystems. All right, so let's get started. So the experiment here is all about composting, and it's actually kind of fun to like see how if things break down, and how long it takes them. So if you have these materials with you, it'd be just kind of like a fun thing to do with your family, just to kind of take a guess. Because I don't know how many of you have ever been like out and about, you've been eating like a piece of fruit or something like that, and then you drop some and you're like, oh, it's fine, it's biodegradable, or whatever. But how long does that really take to biodegrade? Like, how long does it take to break down? Like, oh, don't worry about like that little scrap of paper, like, it'll eventually go back to the earth. But how long does that take, and how does that in fact affect our environment, right? So, food for thought, kind of a cool thing to do, right? So words that we're going to know today are pollution and conservation. I'm pretty sure you guys are very familiar with pollution. We live in California, and everybody's always talking about like the pollution in the air and smog layer in LA and all that kind of stuff. So, but those are 2 words that we're going to focus on. All right. Before I get started, number 1 in the book, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. Those are the questions that I want you to answer today in your books. Question number 2, right here, I want that to be your flip grid response. So, let's get into it. People change ecosystems. Whew, it's at a really weird angle today. I don't know, do you guys like me holding the book? Is that helpful? Or would it be just like better if you like, hey guys, I'm reading from the book to you? Like, I'm going to hold it. Otherwise, it just seems too weird. Sorry, guys. All right. Organisms interact and change with their environments, or change their environment, not with it. Unlike most other organisms, people can change large parts of the environment. Changing the environment can upset the balance in ecosystems. Many people may cause pollution. People may also change their environments by bringing new plants or animals into an ecosystem. They may also hunt and fish too much. Hence why licensing is a thing, right? Pollution. Any substance that damages the environment is called pollution. So it's not just like exhaust from a car. So litter would be pollution, right? Because it's something that's harming the environment. Technically bringing in like animals or plants that don't have anyone to compete with, right, could be technically considered pollution because they're changing the environment in a negative way. They're taking out natural species that are already there, and yeah, that could be. It's an interesting thought. Pollution can affect air, water, and land. Cars and factories put gases that cause harm into the air. Chemicals that people use may end up in rivers and the ocean. People also make trash. Some of it is dumped in landfills and then covered with soil. If the trash does not break down, it can cause pollution. All right, so number 1, so it says describe how chemicals dumped in a river might affect the organisms living in it. All right, so I'm not even going to go like big scary with my thing. So let's say I have a bottle of all-purpose cleaner. Doesn't have any bleach in it, but it's just, like standard. I actually have a bottle of all-purpose cleaner. It's Mr. Clean all-purpose cleaner that I got at Home Depot. Nothing fancy. And okay, so let's say I just didn't want it anymore, or it was past its like expiration date. I don't even know if it has an expiration date, which is another weird thing. So let's just say, or it got a crack in the bottle, and so let's say I tried to put it in my trash can, but then when the trash can, went to dump it out, that bottle somehow like missed the hopper and fell into the gutter right next to my house, right? And then it just started spilling all the way into the sewer grate. Okay? How is that going to affect the waterways that it goes to, right? I live right near a creek. And so, or even if I were just to squirt a little bit in there, right? Let's say a cupful, right? How is that going to affect any of the organisms living in it? I mean, most of the time on those bottles, they say not to drink it, right? Don't let it around kids because, kids might not use like proper hand protection when using those chemicals or cleaners or whatever. All kinds of things could happen, right? Could cause irritation. That could be like the least of your worries, right? Like you're not supposed to eat a whole tube of toothpaste because it could like make you sick because of the fluoride, whatever. Maybe it could cause skin irritation, all kinds of things. But again, a smaller organism than us even, how could that affect organisms living in there, whether they be animals or plants? All right. And then number 2, this is your Flipgrid response. It says, so what are 3 items that should never be placed in a trash or dumped in landfills? All right. So that's something that you could talk with your parents about. I know in our house there's, we have 3 different like special trash places in our house. 2 of them are for like things that we use around the house that we would place in certain electronic type things. And the other one we keep out in the garage. So those are some like kind of hints for you guys. Think about 3 things that you wouldn't want to put in a landfill or trash. Regular trash anyway. Guys, we're like almost done. All right. Non-native species. People may bring new plants and animals into ecosystems. New species often harm populations in the ecosystem. A non-native species is a plant or animal that does not grow naturally in the ecosystem. And again, it usually harms the populations because it doesn't have any natural competition, right? There's no one there that knows how to or wants to compete with it, right? So like, let's say it's an animal, like predatory animals might not be thinking like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, I don't know what this mouse is. Like, maybe it's a bad mouse and it's going to make me sick. And so then it doesn't get eaten. And then if it doesn't get eaten and it's able to reproduce naturally without any real threat to it continuing to reproduce, right? That population could soon grow very large. Similar to plants, right? That's not in your book. It's in a different book. But there's a picture of like this ivy, this kind of vining plant that was introduced into an environment, and it like grew itself like entirely over like a tree. And is that tree going to be able to survive with all that ivy blocking out its light? Probably not. Okay, anyway, I digress. I'm going to continue because this is going to actually give you an example. All right. Zebra mussels are animals that people accidentally brought to the United States around 1988. The year I was born. Now you know how old I am. I think you already did anyway. But anyway. They entered the Great Lakes attached to a ship that traveled from Russia. Once here, they spread throughout the lakes and then moved into rivers. They ate food and took space that other species needed. These events changed ecosystems permanently. So here's a picture of the zebra mussels. They say these animals can cover almost any surface, right? You go to like San Francisco, the beach, whatever, like on the docks and sometimes on the bottom of ships, you'll always see these mussels just like cover, not necessarily the zebra mussels, but mussels like, right? Because they attach themselves. And then the garlic mustard plant grew only in Europe and parts of Asia many years ago. People brought the plant to the United States to use as a food and medicine. Since animals do not eat the plant, again, no natural competition, right? Again, those animals would be considered competition to this plant. It spread quickly. Less space was left for the other plants to grow. As a result, some animals had to eat less, which could be bad for their population in turn, right? All right, numbers 3 and 4. So describe how the zebra mussels might affect the clam they're growing on. Oh gosh, that's a clam. I don't want to be that clam, do you? Are they going to, like, squeeze his mouth shut? Is he not going to be able to open his shell? Yes. Number 4. Why do you think the population of a species brought into a new area might grow quickly? I've probably discussed the answer to something similar to that like 18 times now, right? I think you guys can figure it out. All right. Regulation and conservation. Too much hunting or fishing can also harm the environment. Regulation puts limits on how many animals a person can hunt and fish. Regulation is one way governments practice conservation. Conservation is an attempt to preserve or protect an environment from harmful changes. Towns, cities, states, and government put aside large areas for conservation. People can go to these areas to enjoy nature. Sometimes, like, I don't know if you guys have ever been hiking or camping, and you've been on a trail, and then they, like, block off certain areas, and they say that this area is they're like trying to like regrow what's naturally there because, you know, people always go off of the trail where they're not supposed to. This is a terrible example. I was trying to, there's a specific word. Anyway, they're trying to reestablish what was once there. You know, so again, that's conservation, setting aside a little area to preserve what is naturally there. So, number 5, describe how fishing licenses might help regulate overfishing, right? So if you got, I'm not a fisherman. I don't know how it works. If any of you have any particular insight, I'd love to hear it. But, I mean, I can still generally fathom how fishing licenses might help to regulate that. And number 6, our very last question. What are the ways people can protect the environment? So what are ways that we can protect it? So we've talked about a couple of them in here, right? If we don't do things like this, right, and then using different kinds of energy, right? Not necessarily chemical energy. And even going back to this, right? If we use like biodegradable cleaners, shampoos, soaps, and stuff like that, they exist. It's not necessarily a super common thing. But those are all ways that we could protect the environment because eventually even, you know, everything gets into the environment somehow, right? So anyway, have a great Friday. We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.